The notification popped up at 2:15 in the afternoon right on my 29th birthday. A surprise party. For my sister Chloe. The post was from last night. A sea of smiling, familiar faces gathered in my parents' Savannah home. The caption read, "Cheers to our real star." My eyes snagged on the gift in the corner, wrapped in a ridiculously large bow. The antique weaving loom, the one I'd been saving for over a year. My mother's comment sat just below the photo, a perfectly aimed dart. So glad we could get this for someone who will actually create something beautiful with it. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the worn wooden floor of my studio. My name is Clara, and for the last 40 months, I've been the silent, invisible investor in my sister's dream. A dream that looked beautiful on Instagram, but was hemorrhaging money in real life. Chloe's boutique, Southern Threads, wasn't a workshop so much as a stage. She sold trendy, mass-produced clothes that vaguely mimicked the traditional textile designs of the Lowcountry, all while branding herself as a champion of local heritage. It was a lie, but a very photogenic one. To my parents, Patricia and Gregory Chloe wasn't just a daughter. She was a social asset, an investment in the family's pristine image among Savannah's old money circles. Her boutique, her influencer status, her carefully curated life, it was all part of their portfolio. They saw her as the family's future, a walking, talking testament to their success. And me, I was the infrastructure, the quiet, reliable daughter who worked as a textile restorer at the City Museum, the one with the steady hands and the even steadier paycheck, the one they called when Chloe's dream hit a financial snag, which it did, every month. It started 40 months ago with a tearful phone call. "The rent is due, Clara, and I'm just a little short. I'll pay you back next week. I swear. I paid it." She never paid me back. The next month, it was a supplier who needed payment up front. The month after that, it was a marketing expense for a pop-up event that never quite broke even. The reasons changed, but the request was always the same, and I always said yes. I'd spent my life in Chloe's shadow, accepting the smaller slice of cake, the hand-me-down, praise the leftover attention. This felt no different. It was just my role, the responsible one, the one who fixed things. So I started a ledger. I called it the Ledger of Legacy. It was a habit from my work at the museum. When I restore a centuries-old piece of lace, I document every stitch, every repair, every hour spent. It's a way of honoring its history. I did the same for Chloe's debts. In a beautiful leather-bound notebook, with my best archival ink, I recorded every transfer. January 1st, $750 rent. January 19th, $400 inventory emergency. February 1st, $750 rent. Each entry was a precise dated record of my own quiet sacrifice. A new piece of restoration equipment I couldn't buy. A workshop in Charleston I couldn't attend. My dream of one day owning that antique loom, the one I saw at an estate auction, felt further and further away with every line I wrote. It was my secret history of being the family's safety net. My parents knew, of course. Not the details, not the exact numbers, but they knew I was helping Chloe out. They encouraged it. "You've always been so good with money, Clara," my mother would say. "Chloe is the creative one. She just needs a little support to get on her feet." 40 months of support. 40 months of her standing on my shoulders while pretending she'd learned to fly on her own. I'd watch her post photos of her booming business, wearing clothes I knew she couldn't afford at dinners I knew I had paid for. And I'd open my ledger and add another line in the ink, drying like a small permanent scar on the page. The phone call came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before my birthday. It was my mother. Her voice was a symphony of controlled panic, a performance I knew all too well. "Clara, honey, thank God you answered. It's a disaster." I didn't ask which disaster. With Chloe, there was always one on the horizon. "A supplier messed up the order for her new collection," she explained, the words tumbling out. "They're holding the entire shipment unless she pays the balance today. It's thousands of dollars, Clara. Her reputation will be ruined if she can't launch on schedule." Thousands! I looked at my banking app, the numbers staring back at me. $5,421. The Loom Fund. Enough to finally make an offer on the antique piece I'd been dreaming of. "Mom, I can't. I just don't have it." "Don't be silly. Of course you do," she said, her tone shifting from panic to impatient. "You're so responsible. Just for a few weeks until Chloe's launch brings in all that new revenue. It's an investment in your sister, sweetheart. An investment. That's what they called it." I thought of my ledger, 40 months of investments with no return. "How much?" I asked, my voice flat. She named a number. $5,000. Everything but the change. I was silent. "Clara, are you there? This is for family." And as I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, a cold academic part of my brain, the part that catalogs and analyzes, kicked in. I finally understood the mechanics of my family, not with hurt, but with a chilling clarity. It was the trap of normalized cruelty. You see, cruelty isn't always a singular, violent act. It's often a quiet erosion, a series of small, seemingly reasonable requests that over time become expectations. My family hadn't woken up one day and decided to be villains. They had simply learned through my compliance that my resources were their resources. My boundaries were suggestions. My sacrifices were utilities. It became normal. They weren't actively trying to hurt me. They just no longer saw me as a person with needs of my own. I was a function, a safety net. You don't thank the safety net for being there. You just expect it to catch you when you fall. Their behavior, which would seem monstrous to an outsider, was to them simply the natural order of things. Chloe was the star. I was the backstage crew. And backstage crews don't get their own spotlight. And why did I let it happen? Why didn't I just say no? That's the other side of the trap. They are the invisible chains of a survivor. People who haven't lived in a prison without bars don't understand. They see a door and shout, "Just walk out." But it's not that simple. For years I had learned that compliance meant a quiet life. Saying yes even when it cost me bought me a fragile peace. It avoided the lectures from my father, the disappointed sighs from my mother, the tearful accusations of jealousy from Chloe. Saying no meant war. It meant being the problem, the difficult one, the one who wasn't a team player. So you learn to survive. You learn that your own needs are a currency you can trade for a lack of conflict. It's not weakness. It's a calculated strategy of self-preservation. It's the logic of someone who has learned that love in their family isn't a given. It's something you earn by being useful and silent. You wear the chains for so long, you forget they're there until one day they ask for the very last thing you have. "I'll send it," I whispered. My finger hovered over the transfer button. This wasn't just money. It was the loom. It was my one selfish dream. It was the physical manifestation of hundreds of hours of painstaking work restoring priceless fabrics for other people's legacies. I closed my eyes. The image of the loom, its aged wood and intricate gears flashed in my mind. Then an image of Chloe's smiling, triumphant face from her latest Instagram post. I pressed send. The confirmation screen glowed. $5,000. gone, and in its place a hollow, echoing silence. The chains felt heavier than ever. The betrayal didn't break me. It forged me. I didn't cry that night. I didn't throw things. I didn't draft a long, angry text message only to delete it. The part of me that did those things, the part that hoped and hurt and pleaded for a different reality, had died somewhere between the Facebook post and the $5,000 I'd sent to save my sister's reputation. What was left was a quiet, cold clarity, the restorer, the archivist, the part of me that knew how to handle fragile things and how to document their decay. I spent the entire night with my ledger, the ledger of legacy. With my best archival ink, I reviewed every entry, every date, every dollar amount. I cross-referenced each line with my digital bank statements, printing out the transaction records and highlighting the corresponding transfers. $750 for rent, $400 for inventory, $1,200 for an emergency that funded a weekend trip to Charleston. Page after page, the numbers told a story of quiet, relentless erosion. My story. When every transaction was verified, I totaled the final page. I wrote the number in clear, steady script. $34,445. It looked obscene on the page, a monument to my own silence. Then I took out an old bookbinding kit I had from a restoration course. With a needle and waxed linen thread, I carefully stitched the pages together. I trimmed a piece of soft, worn leather I'd saved from another project and bound my notebook. When I was finished, it was no longer just a ledger. It was an artifact, a historical record of an unwritten contract, its terms fulfilled and now terminated. As the Savannah sun began to filter through my window, I sat at my small desk and opened my laptop. 3 emails. That's all it would take. The first was to Chloe's landlord. The subject line was simple: lease guarantee for Southern Threads. The body of the email was polite, professional, and final. It stated that as of today's date, my informal financial guarantee for the property was rescinded, and all future communications regarding rent should be directed solely to the tenant Chloe. I hit send. The second was to my bank, a formal request to cancel the automatic transfer that had been bleeding me dry for 40 months. I clicked the confirmation button. Another chain broken. The third email took the longest. It was addressed to my parents and to Chloe. The subject, a final accounting. I scanned each page of the Ledger of Legacy. The neat columns, the dates, the highlighted bank statements. The finished PDF was 24 pages long. I attached it to the email. The message itself was brief. Attached is a complete record of my financial contributions over the past 40 months. Effective immediately this support has ended. This is not a negotiation. Please respect my decision. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it. The point of no return. The end of the quiet, responsible Clara who absorbed every blow and paid every bill. I clicked. The quiet swoosh of the outgoing email was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I closed my laptop, walked into my kitchen, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I made myself a cup of coffee just for me. The storm broke at 8:17 in the morning. My phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, began to vibrate with a fury it had never known. The screen lit up, Mom. I watched it buzz a frantic little dance on the cool granite. I didn't move. I just sipped my coffee. It rang for a full minute, stopped, and then immediately started again. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A text notification popped up a second later. Clara, call me this instant. What is the meaning of this? Before I could even process it, another call. Dad. I silenced it. Then another. Chloe, I silenced that one too. For the next hour, my phone was a relentless siege engine, a constant barrage of calls, texts, and voicemails that I refused to open. It was a chorus of their panic, and for the first time, I was an audience member, not a participant. I felt a strange, detached calm. I had anticipated this. I had spent years anticipating this in a way. I knew their script. First came the outrage, then the accusations, followed by the guilt trips. They never deviated. Around 9:30, a notification from our family group chat appeared. I opened it morbidly curious. My mother, Patricia, had posted a screenshot of my email, the one with the 24-page ledger attached. Does anyone know what this is about? Clara has apparently lost her mind. My father, Gregory, was next. This is an act of war, after everything we've done for her. Then Chloe. I can't believe this. She's trying to ruin me. She's always been jealous. Jealous. The word was so predictable, so tired. I wasn't jealous of her debt, her instability, or the life she performed on social media. I was tired of funding it. The messages from cousins and aunts started to trickle in a mix of confusion and taking sides. But the main assault continued on my personal line. I finally decided to read the texts. Dad, your sister is hysterical. You have 5 minutes to call me back and retract that ridiculous email. Chloe, you're a monster. I hope you're happy. My landlord just called me. How could you do this? Mom, I don't understand where all this anger is coming from. We gave you everything. Ungrateful doesn't even begin to cover it. Not once did anyone mention the $34,000. They couldn't. The numbers were undeniable, each one backed by a bank statement. So they attacked me instead, my character, my motives, my sanity. It was the only defense they had left. I listened to a single voicemail from my father. His voice, usually so controlled, was strained with fury. This spreadsheet, this ledger you've created, it's a fantasy, a list of lies to make yourself feel important. You will reverse this, Clara. You will call your sister's landlord and fix what you've broken. This is not a request. But it was a request. A desperate, panicked request from a man who had just lost control. I deleted the voicemail. The rest of the day was a study in restraint. I put my phone on silent and focused on my work. I submitted my notice at the museum, explaining I had accepted a position out of state. My supervisor was sad to see me go, but congratulated me warmly. As I packed up my desk, surrounded by the quiet history of the museum, I felt a profound sense of peace. The chaos was happening out there in their world, on their phones. But in my world, there was only the quiet hum of a decision made and a future waiting. That evening, I got one last text from Chloe. It was different from the others, not angry, but pleading. Please, Clara, just talk to me. We can work this out. Don't do this. I looked at the message, and for a fleeting moment, the old Clara the fixer, the peacekeeper, stirred within me. But I thought of the loom. I thought of my forgotten birthday. I thought of the 40 months of entries in my ledger. I put my phone down, unanswered. The storm could rage all it wanted. I was finally safe in the harbor I had built for myself. The silence from my family was a strange gift. It gave me space to breathe, to plan. I spent the next few days in a quiet flurry of activity, disentangling my life from the city I had always called home. I called my landlord, negotiated an early end to my lease. I researched moving companies. I started packing, sorting my small collection of belongings into 3 piles: keep, donate, and discard. There was a surprising amount in the discard pile. old clothes that never quite fit books I'd never read again, trinkets that held memories I no longer wanted to keep. Each item I threw away felt like a small act of liberation, a severing of a thread to a past I was determined to leave behind. In the back of my closet, tucked away on the top shelf, was a dusty cardboard box. The sides were soft with age, and in my great-grandmother's elegant script it said, "Eleanor's Threads, Eleanor." She was the one who had taught me to weave, the one who'd first put a shuttle in my small hands. Her patience had been a quiet island in the noisy sea of my childhood. She saw something in me that my parents never did. A stillness, a respect for the craft. I hadn't opened the box in years. I carefully lifted it down and set it on my bed, the smell of cedar and thyme rising from the cardboard. Inside were her old tools, smooth and dark from use. Wooden bobbins wound with faded silk thread, a hand-carved shuttle that fit perfectly in my palm, and beneath it all, a small bundle of letters tied with a blue velvet ribbon. They were letters she had written to my grandmother, her daughter, decades ago. I untied the ribbon, my fingers gentle. The paper was brittle, the ink faded to a soft brown. I picked one at random. "My dearest Martha," the letter began. "The rainy season has settled over Savannah, and the air is so thick you could weave it. I've been at the loom all morning. It feels more a part of me than ever. Sometimes I think my soul lives in its wood." I smiled, tracing the loops of her handwriting. "I was thinking of you today, remembering when you were a little girl hiding under the warp threads while I worked. You never had the patience for it, but your Clara, she has the gift. I see it in her eyes." My breath caught. I told her yesterday that when I'm gone, the loom is hers. It's not just wood and string, Martha. It's our story. That old rosewood frame has held more of our family's history than any photo album. Remember the maker's mark I showed you? The tiny sparrow carved on the inside of the left leg. That's how she'll know it's the one. That's how she'll know it's her legacy. The letter slipped from my fingers. The tiny sparrow. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I fumbled through my apps, my thumb jabbing at the Instagram icon. I scrolled frantically back to the post for my birthday. There it was, the party, the crowd of smiling faces, and Chloe posing theatrically beside her gift, the loom. I zoomed in. The photo was high resolution, taken on my father's expensive phone. I zoomed in further, my finger shaking, tracing the lines of the wood, the left leg, the inside. In the shadow just beneath the main crossbeam was a small dark imperfection, a knot in the wood perhaps, a trick of the light. But I knew. My blood ran cold, then hot. I remembered being 8 years old, sitting on the floor at Eleanor's feet. She had guided my small hand to that exact spot. "Feel that little bird," she had whispered. "That's our secret. That's how you'll always know it's ours." The phone fell onto the bed. It wasn't just an antique loom. It was the loom. Eleanor's loom. My loom. This wasn't just a thoughtless gift anymore. This was a desecration. They had taken my history, our history, and turned it into a decorative prop for Chloe's fraudulent boutique. They had held my inheritance in their hands and seen nothing but its price tag. The $34,000 was an insult. The forgotten birthday was a cruelty. But this was sacrilege. The calm I had cultivated over the past few days shattered, replaced by a pure, silent, white-hot rage. This changed everything. The rage didn't burn out. It distilled. It cooled into something hard and clear, like a diamond. I was no longer a hurt daughter lashing out. I was a historian correcting the record. I was a restorer, and the thing that was broken wasn't a piece of fabric. It was the truth. I took out my phone and laid Eleanor's letter on the floor, the light from the window, illuminating the faded brown ink. I took a clear, high-resolution photo, making sure the key passage was sharp and legible. I told her yesterday that when I'm gone, the loom is hers. It's our story. Remember the maker's mark I showed you, the tiny sparrow? That's how she'll know it's her legacy. Then I opened Instagram. I took a screenshot of the birthday post. In my photo editor, I drew a single clean red circle around the inside of the loom's left leg. The tiny sparrow. It was unmistakable. A dark carved bird hidden in the shadows, waiting for someone to remember it was there. I opened a new email. I addressed it to my mother, my father, and to Chloe. There was no subject line. There was no text in the body of the email. No accusations, no explanations, no anger. There were only 2 attachments. Eleanor's _letter .jpg, the loom PNG. The silence of the email was its true weapon. It wasn't a conversation. It was a presentation of evidence. It didn't ask for a response. It simply stated a fact so profound that it shattered their entire narrative. Their excuse of thoughtlessness, of simply forgetting my birthday, of just wanting to help the creative one, all of it crumbled to dust in the face of this. This wasn't a mistake. This was a profound, generational blindness. They had taken a sacred object, a piece of our family's soul, and had seen only its market value. They had gifted away my inheritance, not out of malice, but out of an ignorance so deep it was a form of violence. My finger paused over the send button for only a second. This wasn't an act of anger anymore. It was an act of finality. I was closing a door they never even knew existed. I was showing them the history they had erased, the legacy they had trampled, the daughter they had never, ever truly seen. I hit send. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph. I felt a great hollowing quiet, the quiet of a museum after closing, when all the stories have been told and all the artifacts are settled in their cases. I had presented the evidence. The case was closed. Whatever they did now, whatever they said or felt, was irrelevant. They could no longer claim ignorance. They could no longer pretend. I had held up a mirror, and now they had to live with the reflection. The backlash when it came was not a storm, but a quiet creeping tide of social frost. It started with the unlikes on my mother's charity luncheon photos. Then came the canceled RSVPs to a garden party she was hosting. Savannah's high society, for all its genteel pretense, has a razor-sharp instinct for scandal. They can smell a crumbling facade from 3 counties away. My family was being shunned. The story of the loom, of the 40 months of payments of the birthday party I wasn't invited to, had seeped into the community. Not because I'd said a word to anyone, but because their own friends and acquaintances had seen the evidence I sent and started talking. The ledger with its cold, hard numbers was more damning than any public accusation I could have made. Backed into a corner, my mother did what she always did. She produced a play, and Chloe was her star performer. I found out about it on a Tuesday morning. A friend from my old book club sent me a screenshot. A local Savannah lifestyle blogger, someone with a modest but loyal following, had just posted to her Instagram story. It was a brightly colored graphic with a smiling photo of Chloe. So excited to have local designer and fashion icon Chloe in the studio tomorrow night for a special live stream. She's ready to clear the air, share her side of the story, and talk about the challenges of being a young entrepreneur. You won't want to miss this raw and honest conversation. Raw and honest. I almost laughed. My mother's fingerprints were all over this. Unable to control the narrative whispered over cocktails and at country club lunches, she was moving the battle to a stage she thought she could manage the curated performative world of social media. This was their counterattack, a strategic pivot from denying the facts to reframing the feelings. They couldn't dispute the $34,000, so they would focus on Chloe's hurt. They couldn't justify the loom, so they would talk about my jealousy. They would turn my quiet act of self-preservation into a cruel, calculated attack on their golden child. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. It was a strategy as old as our family itself. I remembered when Chloe was in high school and was caught cheating on a history exam. Within 24 hours, my mother had convinced the principal that Chloe was suffering from debilitating test anxiety and that the pressure I, the straight-A student, put on her was simply too much to bear. Chloe got a retest. I got a lecture about being more supportive. They were trying to do the same thing now, just on a larger scale. They were going to paint a picture of a fragile, creative soul being crushed by her bitter, resentful older sister. They would use words like misunderstanding and family is complicated. They would talk about love and forgiveness, all while conveniently ignoring the 24 pages of documented exploitation. I thought about what to do. Should I release the ledger publicly? Should I post Eleanor's letter? Should I fight back with my own version of the truth? No, that was their game, not mine. My power was in the evidence I had already presented. It was quiet, irrefutable, and in the hands of the people whose opinions they valued most. I didn't need to shout my story from the rooftops. I just needed to wait. I trusted that given a live microphone and an audience, Chloe's true character would eventually reveal itself. Performers, after all, can only stick to the script for so long before they start to improvise. And Chloe's improvisations were always her downfall. So I made myself a cup of tea, settled onto my couch, and set a reminder on my phone for the live stream. The show was about to start, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. The live stream started at 7 o'clock. I was on my couch, a glass of water on the coffee table, my laptop open. I felt like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. The blogger, a woman with a bright manufactured smile named Savannah, introduced Chloe with gushing praise. A true Savannah artist, a trailblazer in local fashion? Then the camera panned to Chloe. She looked flawless. Her makeup was soft, making her look vulnerable. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my rent. She dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue as she began to speak. "Thank you for having me, Savannah. It's been a really difficult week." The performance was masterful. She spoke about the pressures of being a young entrepreneur, the constant struggle to stay afloat. She didn't mention me by name at first, referring only to family misunderstandings and unfortunate private matters being made public. She painted a picture of herself as a dedicated artist, just trying to share her vision with the world being torn down by negativity. "Some people," she said, her voice catching perfectly, "don't understand the creative process. They see the success, but they don't see the sacrifice." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes glistening. And when that negativity comes from inside your own family, it's just heartbreaking. The comments section, visible on the side of the screen, filled with sympathy. "Stay strong, Chloe haters, gonna hate. We support you." Then Savannah leaned forward, her expression shifting from sympathetic to journalistic. "Chloe, there have been some documents circulating online, a ledger of sorts, that seems to detail years of financial support. Can you speak to that?" Chloe's smile tightened just a fraction. "My sister has always been very meticulous. She helped me out with some loans when I was starting the business, which I'm so grateful for. I think she's just confused about the nature of our arrangement." So the $34,000 was a loan Savannah pressed. It was family helping family. Chloe deflected smoothly. I think she's trying to frame it in a way that makes me look irresponsible, and it's just not fair. She was good. She was very, very good. She was making me sound like a cold, calculating accountant and herself like a free-spirited artist who couldn't be bothered with numbers. But then Savannah picked up a card from her desk. We have a question from a viewer, a textile historian, actually. She asks about the antique loom that was gifted to you. She says it looks like a rare 18th century rosewood model, possibly from the collection of Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, my great-grandmother's name. The air left my lungs. Chloe's face went blank. It was a flicker so fast that most people would have missed it. But I saw it. The smooth mask of her performance cracked. She didn't know who Eleanor Vance was. The name meant nothing to her. It's a beautiful piece, Chloe said, recovering quickly. My parents gave it to me to inspire my work. It's the centerpiece of my studio. Eleanor Vance was a renowned weaver. Savannah continued reading from the card. Her pieces are in museums. That loom isn't just an antique. It's a piece of Savannah's artistic history. A priceless legacy. Priceless. Legacy. The words hung in the air. That's wonderful to know, Chloe stammered. The viewer also asks, Savannah said, her eyes narrowing slightly, if it's true that your sister is a textile restorer who specializes in preserving historical artifacts like that loom. The trap had been sprung, and Chloe, blinded by her own performance, walked right into it. My sister has a job at the museum, she said dismissively, waving her hand. It's very different from what I do. I'm a creator. I build things. She just maintains old things. The words were a direct hit. The raw, unfiltered disdain she'd always had for my work now broadcast for thousands to see. Savannah leaned in. So you don't think her work has value? It's not that, Chloe said, her voice rising. The practiced vulnerability was gone, replaced by a sharp defensive edge. It's just that some of us have to carry the family's ambition. Some of us have to build the legacy, and others just support that. It's always been that way. So you see your sister's role as supporting you, Savannah asked, her tone deceptively gentle. And then it happened. The improvisation. The moment the mask didn't just crack, it shattered. Of course, Chloe snapped, her eyes flashing. She's the older sister. She's the responsible one. She has a responsibility to support me. That's her role. A dead silence fell over the live stream. Savannah, the blogger, just stared, her mouth slightly open. The comments section froze, then exploded. Did she really just say that, wow, the entitlement is real? Chloe's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She had said the quiet part out loud. She had spoken the unspoken contract of our family into a live microphone. It wasn't about love or support or misunderstanding. It was about my designated role. I didn't smile. I didn't feel a rush of victory. I just felt a profound, echoing quiet. I reached over and closed my laptop. The performance was over. My sister, in her desperate attempt to save her own image, had just handed me the one thing I never could have achieved on my own, the unvarnished, undeniable truth. The clip was everywhere by morning. Someone had recorded Chloe's final fatal minute on the live stream and set it loose on the internet. It wasn't a slow burn, it was a digital tsunami. My phone, which I had left on the charger overnight, was a minefield of notifications. Texts from friends I hadn't spoken to in months. Tags on Facebook posts from people I barely knew. The video had been given a title, The Savannah Heiress Meltdown. I watched it once clinically. I saw my sister, her face, contorted, her voice sharp, with a lifetime of unearned privilege. She has a responsibility to support me. That's her role. The comments below were a brutal, instantaneous verdict. The role of an older sister is not to be your personal bank. Wow. I've seen entitlement, but this is a masterclass. Her poor sister. I hope she's 1,000 miles away from this family. I was. Or I would be soon. The community of artisans in Savannah, a small, tight-knit world built on mutual respect and a love for the craft, was the first to react. An email appeared in my inbox from a master woodworker I deeply admired. Clara, I just saw the video. Disgraceful. Your great-grandmother would be ashamed of how they've treated her legacy. You have our full support. Our support. It was the first time I felt like I belonged to a family in a long time. The social fallout for my parents was quieter, but just as devastating. A friend texted me from a charity luncheon. Your mother is here. It's awkward. People are being polite, but the moment she joins a conversation, it just dies. I saw Mrs. Telfair literally turn her back and walk away. They had built their entire world on a foundation of appearances. Now that foundation was cracking, and the whispers were bringing the walls down around them. Partners pulled out of my father's investment circles. Invitations to parties and fundraisers mysteriously stopped arriving. In a city like Savannah, reputation is currency, and my family was suddenly bankrupt. The final blow came a week later. I was in my apartment surrounded by packing boxes when a single text lit up my phone. It was from Chloe. The anger was gone. The pleading was gone. All that was left was a hollowed-out shell. They're liquidating the boutique. Everything. The landlord terminated the lease. A second text followed a minute later. They're taking the loom. The auction house is coming for it tomorrow. I read the words and felt nothing. Not joy, not satisfaction, not even pity. I thought of Eleanor's letter of the tiny sparrow carved in the wood of a legacy passed down and utterly misunderstood. Chloe hadn't just lost a business. She had lost our history. A history she never even knew she held. It wasn't a victory. It was just the end. The collapse wasn't a single loud crash. It was the slow, grinding sound of a foundation giving way. My family, the epitome of Savannah society, became ghosts in their own town. My father's business partners suddenly found reasons to end long-standing contracts. My mother's name was quietly dropped from the guest lists of the charity galas she once ruled. Chloe's boutique, once a monument to their social ambition, was now a hollowed-out storefront on Broughton Street, its windows papered over a public tombstone marking their fall from grace. They hadn't just lost money, they had lost their currency of relevance. And watching it all from a distance, I finally understood the fragility of their world. It was the illusion of power in an empty wallet. You see, there's a profound difference between having and being. My family had things. They had a beautiful home, expensive cars, a membership at the country club. Their status, their friendships, their very identity was a costume rented with the currency of wealth and social standing. But beneath it all, who were they? What did they be? They weren't kind or wise or particularly talented. Their value was external, borrowed. So, when the money dried up and the reputation shattered, they had no inner reserves to draw from. There was no character to fall back on, no integrity to stand upon. They weren't a fallen dynasty. They were just empty rooms in a house that was no longer theirs. They were nothing. In the midst of their silent implosion, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was, my name. The sender was the director of textile conservation at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, one of the most respected institutions in the country. He had seen an article about Eleanor Vance, my great-grandmother, published in a small historical journal years ago. In it, my work restoring one of her pieces was mentioned in a footnote. He wrote that he admired my meticulous approach and that a senior restorer position had just opened up. He wanted to know if I would be interested in applying. I stared at the email, at the prestigious name at the offer that felt like it was from another universe. This wasn't a handout. It wasn't a reward for my family drama. It was a recognition of my skill, my passion, my being. It was everything I had ever wanted. The Boston offer wasn't just a job. It was a different life. A life where my worth wasn't determined by who I supported, but by what I could create and preserve. I spent the next 2 days packing the last of my boxes, my movements calm and deliberate. I didn't call my family to tell them I was leaving. There was nothing left to say. On a cool Friday morning, I loaded the final box into my small car. I took one last look at the apartment that had been both my prison and my sanctuary. I left the keys on the counter and walked out without looking back. As I drove north, leaving the Spanish moss and the heavy history of Savannah behind me, I didn't feel like I was running away from anything. I felt like I was finally driving home. A year later, I drove back into Savannah. Boston was crisp, clean lines and the sharp autumn air off the Charles River. Savannah was a memory steeped in humidity and the sweet, heavy scent of jasmine. It felt like a lifetime ago. The Clara who had fled north a refugee from her own family was not the woman who was driving back now. I hadn't come back for them. I hadn't come back for closure or apologies or the bitter satisfaction of seeing their downfall from up close. I had heard the stories through the grapevine of distant relatives. My father's business had collapsed. They'd sold the house. Chloe had moved to a small apartment across town, working a retail job, her influencer career, a forgotten ghost. I felt a distant academic sadness for them, the way you might feel reading about a historical tragedy. But it wasn't my tragedy anymore. I had come back for Eleanor. The auction was held on the lawn of what used to be my parents' house. Strangers walked through rooms that held my childhood, placing numbered paddles on pieces of my history, the grand dining table where I'd been ignored, the porcelain vases my mother had prized. It was all just inventory now, items listed in a catalog. I saw them from a distance, huddled together near the back, looking like strangers at their own funeral. My father looked older, grayer. My mother's face was a mask of strained composure. Chloe was nowhere in sight. I felt a flicker of something, a ghost of an old ache. But it passed. I wasn't here to engage. I was here to acquire. I took my place, a numbered paddle, 73, clutched in my hand. I watched as my mother's silver tea set was sold for a fraction of its value. I watched as my father's favorite leather armchair, the one he always sat in while ignoring me, was bought by a young couple who looked thrilled with their bargain. And then they brought it out. Lot number 247, an antique rosewood weaving loom, 18th century. The auctioneer's voice was brisk, stripping it of all its magic. It was just another piece of wood, another object to be sold. But I saw it. I saw the tiny carved sparrow on the inside of the left leg. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with a fierce protective certainty. The bidding started low. A few antique dealers, men who saw only wood and profit, raised their paddles. The price climbed slowly. 5,000, 7, 10. I waited. I let them play their game. I watched the auctioneer's eyes scan the crowd looking for the next bid, and when the price settled at 12,000 just before his gavel was about to fall, I raised my paddle one single time. My voice was clear and steady when I called out the number, 25,000. A hush fell over the small crowd. The antique dealers lowered their paddles, shaking their heads. The auctioneer looked at me, surprised. $25,000? Going once? Going twice? He paused, his eyes sweeping the lawn one last time. He saw my father, then saw the look of dawning horror on his face as he finally recognized me. "Sold the auctioneer," said his gavel, cracking through the quiet air, "to bidder number 73. A quiet ripple went through the crowd as people turned to see who had just paid double the going rate for an old loom. I walked forward, signed the papers, and arranged for delivery to a new address. A small workshop space I had leased that morning. I didn't look at my family. I didn't need to. This wasn't for them. This wasn't an act of defiance aimed at them. It was an act of restoration. I was bringing a piece of our true legacy home, not to their home, to mine. The workshop was a large, airy room in the Starland district, with tall windows that flooded the space with Savannah's golden light. For 2 days it was empty, except for the loom. It sat in the center of the room, not as furniture, but as a presence, an ancestor. I spent hours just sitting with it, running my hands over the smooth rosewood tracing the secret sparrow, breathing in the scent of history. I could have kept it for myself, a private monument to my victory, a beautiful silent trophy in my Boston apartment. It would have been justified, but it felt small. It felt like an ending, not a beginning. And as I sat there, I realized what kind of justice I was truly after. There are 2 kinds of justice in this world. There's the justice of punishment, which is backward-looking. It's focused on the wicked, on their crimes, on making them pay, and there's a satisfaction in that, a balancing of the scales. But then there's a higher form of justice, the justice of the sower. This kind of justice is forward-looking. It's not about the past. It's about the future. It doesn't focus on tearing down what is broken, but on building what is beautiful. The ultimate victory isn't watching your enemies fall. It's creating something so full of life and light that their actions, their cruelty, their entire existence becomes a footnote in your story, a small, insignificant shadow cast by the brilliant thing you've built. That was the justice I wanted. So, I didn't take the loom to Boston. I used the money I'd recovered from the lawsuit, combined with the salary I'd so carefully saved, and I gave the loom a new home. 2 weeks later, a simple hand-painted sign went up over the door, the Eleanor Vance Workshop, a community guild for the textile arts. My vision was simple. This wouldn't be a business. It would be a sanctuary, a place where young artisans, the ones with talent but no resources, the ones who felt invisible just like I had, could come and learn for free. They could use the tools, the threads, the looms. I bought 3 more with the remaining funds without the crushing pressure of trying to turn their passion into a product before they were ready. It was a place to learn, to experiment, to fail, to create. The first person to walk through the door was a young woman with paint-stained hands and eyes full of a hope so fierce it reminded me of myself. She'd heard about the workshop through the artisan grapevine. She confessed she'd been about to give up to take a job as a waitress because she couldn't afford studio space. I showed her to a loom, handed her a shuttle, and told her, "Welcome home." That afternoon, for the first time in what felt like 100 years, the sound of a shuttle flying across warp threads filled the air. It wasn't Eleanor's loom. It was a simpler, modern one, but it was the same sound. The sound of creation. The sound of a legacy, not just being preserved, but being passed on, being woven into the future. This, I thought, watching her work, a smile on my face. This is what winning feels like. Not the fall of my family, but the rise of this. This was my true inheritance. The sound is what I love most. Not the silence of a museum, but the gentle, rhythmic clack-clack thump of the looms. It's the sound of creation of threads, becoming fabric of ideas, becoming tangible. The savannah sun, thick and golden, pours through the tall workshop windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, brilliant stars. A young woman named Maya is sitting at Eleanor's loom, her brow furrowed in concentration. She's trying to master a complex brocade pattern, and her fingers, though hesitant, are becoming more confident with every pass of the shuttle. Like this, she asks, looking up at me, her eyes, a mix of frustration and hope. I place my hand over hers, guiding the movement. Gently I say, "Let the threads tell you what they need. Don't force them." She nods, takes a breath, and tries again. This time the motion is smoother. A small, perfect row of pattern appears in the cloth. A smile blooms on her face, and I feel a warmth in my chest that no amount of money or social standing could ever buy. I don't think about my family much anymore. When I do, it's not with anger or bitterness. It's with a kind of distant, quiet sadness. They are a chapter in a history book I no longer need to read. Their story ended in the echoing silence of an auction lawn. Mine began here in this room with this sound. My victory wasn't their fall, it was this rise. The creation of this guild, this community of weavers, painters, and potters who have found a home here. This is my family now, a family not of blood, but of shared passion and mutual respect. The loom, Eleanor's loom, is no longer a symbol of betrayal. It's a bridge. It connects my great-grandmother's hands to Maya's, and one day to the hands of someone Maya will teach. It's a living thing, its wooden heart beating with the rhythm of every shuttle, its soul woven into every new piece of cloth. It's not just being preserved, it's being reborn every single day. And this is a letter, a message to you. To the one who has always felt like you were on the outside looking in, the one who sets the table for a party you'll never truly be a part of, the one who is praised for being the responsible one, which is just a pretty word for the one they can take for granted. I see you. I was you. Your worth is not determined by the space they refuse to give you. Your value is not a reflection of their inability to see it. You have spent years, maybe decades, trying to restore a relationship that is rotted through. You have patched holes, mended tears, and poured your own soul into preserving something that was never meant to last. Stop. Let it go. Your legacy is not the role they assigned you. It is not the patient, silent fixer. It is not the family ATM. It is the one you claim for yourself. The greatest act of restoration is not fixing what they broke. It is building something new, something that is entirely your own. Weave your own story. Use your own colors. Create a fabric so strong and so beautiful that the old tattered thing you left behind becomes nothing more than a forgotten scrap in the history of you. That is your true inheritance.